All right, while it's set up, so I'm Craig Sturgis. I run a consultancy called Vibe CTO. It's been a bunch of different names over the time. Been a solo consultant for like 5 years, mostly as a fractional CTO. In the last year, I've been way more forward focused on AI for reasons you all probably can identify with. But I do mostly helping software companies adopt AI into their normal lifecycle. This is mostly what I would call brownfield versus greenfield development. I do my own greenfield development, but that's my day-to-day. I've been spending a lot of time over the last year, I would call it, if not more than that, but especially this quarter, on software development lifecycle for a startup, and that's what this talk is about. And so far this year, Q1, these are the stats of just me shipping code for a startup that's been around for 4 years, has an established code base. But start to finish, linear issues, 540 of them, shipped, deployed, released, set across 745 PRs across 60 working days. I took some time off. That's just me. There was one low impact incident, which was not the fault of AI, it was the fault of me. So when it's nice to have other people working with you to help make sure you've got the right judgment calls. But that's kind of the results. But the footnote on that is across that 540 changes, none of these things were giant big bangs. They weren't 10,000 line PRs. They are small pieces. My rule of thumb is if it would have been a 3-point story in the before times, that's about the biggest change that I like to ship for the most part. There's some outliers, but I like to break stuff down using kind of more of an architectural approach. This is just good software engineering. It is let's make sure our target state architecture is really clear. Let's break down the work. AI can help us break down the work if we need to. It's much less of a back and forth I've been doing software engineering or product management for 20 years. I've sat in a lot of meetings where we, for hours, would kind of go through sprint planning and breakdown. That kind of coordination still is important. We can just do it a lot faster, and the robots can help us. The main caveat is what I'm about to show you. It assumes you have good CI. It assumes you have a good test pyramid set up in your code base. If you don't have any of that, you're going to be in a world of pain if you try to go this fast. The good news is that AI can help you invest in that. A big chunk of that 540 issues shipped was test coverage, was increasing the end-to-end coverage and a full regression suite of what I was about to point a slop cannon at. But that is incredibly important for this type of workflow. So the biggest, and this is hard to read, but the biggest sort of prompt for why am I focusing so much on this particular workflow is, okay, I'm just one person. The startup and I have agreed, let's really try to push the limits of what one person can do. And the biggest sort of thing that is important to me is I need to maintain a good mental model of the system. You can fire a slop cannon at a code base and not understand what's going on. Both for many reasons, my own pride as a software engineer, but also just if something goes wrong, I need to understand how the system connects together, and I need to generate artifacts to do that. I'm not going to, I've tried Gastown, I've tried Claude and some of the other pure orchestrators Let It Fly, and for me, it will build a lot of stuff, but it's stuff that is hard. I think Simon Willison uses the term cognitive debt of, I don't understand this system, and maybe agents can help me with that, but there's a balance there that you really need to be walking, and that was really important. So what automated means in terms of an SDLC is, you can't see this is one command, it's GWG, it's called Git, it's my own command I built with Claude, stands for Git Work Tree Go, and it's there's a feature, I can't remember what it's called, the convention of branching in Git, which is feat/chore/fix/. I use that, and this is just a branch name pulled out of linear. That's what I use as an issue tracker wherever I can. Thank God there's a better Jira now. But this basically kicks off a workflow that spins up an isolated work tree on my local machine, finds a free port that I can have its own dev server, its own credentials, copies out of 1Password and wherever else, all the things it needs to run a completely isolated local dev setup by itself, and that multiple ones of these can run at the same time. Then it kicks off a planning workflow based on which type of task it is, and then once I approve the plan and the acceptance criteria, it's off to the races. And we'll kind of get a little dramatized version, because this particular example from yesterday, this ran for an hour and 40 minutes of clock time. And so, I apologize, it's probably small on the screen. The big things here are the gates. This probably takes like 10-ish minutes to get through the first gates, where it's, for a feature, it's going into planning mode, and it's really dialing in. It's asking me questions about maybe what's not clear from the linear ticket, or how to shape the plan, and then I put a big focus on acceptance criteria. I was in product, I was a product manager full-time for 7 years. Acceptance criteria are really important for everyone involved. And so it kind of talks through that, and then, but once I hit go, these are the acceptance criteria, the plan looks good, it'll run through a series of steps that might end up reviewing the code, like it'll implement the code, it will review the code, it will verify that the acceptance criteria are met by spinning up an agent browser or those types of things, and it will run through an iterative review cycle, sometimes up to 25 to 35 rounds, all from start to finish, so that I'm not looking and reviewing the code or testing it until the robots have reviewed it very thoroughly, many times through many iterations, and that they've verified that it works. It doesn't always work 100% of the time. I'm still refining this workflow, but that's kind of the big picture of what's happening. So go through it kind of step by step. Layer one is shell. I mentioned the shell script, the get work tree go. I have get work tree go and get work tree cleanup. These are shell scripts that I built, and it uses conventions to say, like, okay, is this a bug fix? Is this a feature? Is it a chore? Am I moving stuff around in Terraform or whatever else? Or am I just making tests? Am I filling something in? What it will do is it will look at what that branch, or what I put in the branch name, and it will decide, it will auto-launch Claude Code. I use Claude Code. This increasingly I'm porting over to Codex as I run into rate limits, and also open code as I mess with local models. But kicks it off, does my skill of like feature, bug fix, chore, and starts that workflow automatically, so I can do this in parallel. Most of this is optimizing for, I will have 5 to 6, sometimes up to 10 of these running at the same time on my laptop. Other piece, there's a .work tree setup. This is my own convention where I use this command across many projects. I try to use this workflow across a bunch of things, but different projects require different things to get a local dev environment set up. There's a little .work tree setup that is called by that script that will do the project specific stuff. That's checked in the source control. Layer 2, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time here. CLAUDE.md, I break it up. The big thing I've been spending a lot of time on is like keeping it light. It's very easy to make a fat CLAUDE.md to where it's then eating a ton of the context. But things like use red-green test-driven development, like that is a top-level commandment. Works really well with agents, as I'm sure many of you know. But this is kind of where the key sort of everyday things are. There's one example that probably should be a hook of there's scar tissue in here. When I get burned by something, there's a skill I'll go into later that kind of prompts me for, do I want to update CLAUDE.md, any rules or any skills with what I learned from session history or what broke, etc. Layer 3 is hooks. I won't spend a ton of time here because Anthony gave a talk on hooks last month, and I either was inspired by or straight up lifted a whole lot of what he presented last month. It was awesome. You should go check out at least his deck and his repo. It was very helpful, as I had hooks before last month, but my hooks have multiplied since then. The one thing I will spend some time on is, if you're not aware of destructive command guard, this is one I really recommend. It's I am now blanking on the guy's name who puts it out, but it is a hook. It's built in Rust. It runs in single-digit milliseconds on every bash call, where it is looking for destructive commands, rm.rf, like the stuff that's built in, where it's doing like git reset hard, etc. And there are plugins you can get for your database. I have one for Terraform, for Postgres, anything where it's going to do something I might not want it to do. It hard blocks that with a hook and makes you do it yourself. Sometimes it's annoying. I'm willing to be annoyed probably 4 or 5 times a full day just to make sure it's not doing something. Now, I know we're going to hear about sandboxing after this, but even inside a sandbox, destructive things can happen. I find this is just like a pro tip that I'd love to share to everybody. It's worth installing in, and I think it works across almost all the agent harnesses. The big piece is skills. Like, this has been a net new thing for me over the last couple of months. I kind of gave you the overview, but skills are composable. Like, that is the nice thing about it. I started with individual skills that would do let me review the code more specifically. Let me respond to pull request feedback. Let me do a 5 whys analysis on this bug. And so all of those things can be run individually. Let me verify that the code that I've built is actually doing what it should be doing by spinning up Agent Browser or Chrome DevTools or Claude and Chrome. It's anything that's going to run your application for you against a local dev server and confirm based on the acceptance criteria. But all of those things together can be put into what I would call like a bigger meta skill, like feature, bug fix, chore, those types of things. But you can see if there's anything. I'll get into the details of some more of these in a little bit. I do use other people's skills, just like I use other people's hooks. The built-in Claude Simplify one I've had a lot of good luck with, where after it's done an implementation, try to run a pass and simplify and refactor what's there to the simplest possible version of what still accomplishes the task. The front-end design skill, also good. Makes it look a little less generic. It spins up, if you haven't used it, it will create mock-ups and open a browser tab and have you choose between different options. Highly recommend that. Language servers, also super helpful for whatever language you're using to cut down on tokens, just grepping without any symbols. And then there's an outer loop. I use a review agent. I just use the built-in Claude one, built into the GitHub action. You can install it with install GitHub Actions. Does a code review on pull request. Despite the number of times and things that I have doing code review, it somehow still catches more. And so even though there are very similar prompts on my local machine as there are in the GitHub action, it finds new stuff. I'm still working on tweaking this so that more of it happens locally for reasons I'll get into in a minute. You might use CodeRabbit or whatever else. I know a lot of people have. But a good specialized code review agent at pull request time or at merge gate time, I think, is really useful. So I've been talking about this iterative review. This has been built up, and I have iterated on iterative review over time, where it's now spinning up multiple agents based on things it has seen in my project. Regularly I'm talking about man, that really went off the rails, or this was something that popped up, the agent did that. It's just you shouldn't do that. So there are specific reviewers for scale and N+1 issues that it's found in the code base, even ones that I or Claude didn't make. There's lots of silent failures that it's found. So there's now 3 specialists. Security and API surface is the 3rd one. This will change, but it will run through this up to 4 iterations so that it's not constantly burning tokens, but it's doing that locally, it's merging its findings, it's kicking them back out, and making sure, and each one has its own set of findings it's accepted, where this is a nitpick, it's not that big of a deal, or it's a follow-up. At the end, it'll do a git push, it'll then go into my PR loop skill, where it will watch the CI, watch for failures that weren't caught locally. If they weren't caught locally, that's on me, but there's always stuff that it could do better. So I talked about this earlier, a regression. I have a regression skill that runs my Playwright suite, a whole test suite. I have pre-commits and CI for unit tests, integration tests, etc. But I try to do a daily full run of the full regression suite. I'm still working on breaking down, hey, run the part of the regression suite that goes with the part of the application that I'm changing. That is another tune, but it's nice. All these things that I can think of in my head, I can just ask the robot to do, and things that I never would have done, it allows me to really maybe get a little too complicated. That's a piece of feedback some of you might give me, but it's nice to have that done inside these types of things. I have a test sign up. We have this startup has a relatively complex sign up and onboarding. It is automated a way to do that, including email verification, those types of things. And then closing, I made a reference to this, like there's this idea of review learnings. There's a popular AI newsletter called Every.2. They talk about compound engineering. I was kind of inspired by that to do this, where it will ask you if you want to learn from the session when it hits a stop, like a full stop at the end. And when it does that, it will go look at the full log of the session, including what I said, what Claude did, what feedback it got from iterative review, from the PR feedback loop, and it'll say like, do you want to, it'll look at all the skills, the CLAUDE.md, all the pieces in this harness and all this framework that I've got built up, and say, do I need to make any updates here? Now, I'm having to say no a good bit of time because I'm trying to also balance like how much is going into context every time. Like, I don't want an overweight CLAUDE.md. Claude Code now warns you if you have too big of a CLAUDE.md. I've hit that a couple of times. I wish I had a more scientific way to test all of this stuff and how effective it is. Had a thread on Indie Hackers a month or so ago about that, but still working on it. Open to what's working for you all. But I found this to be really helpful in the couple weeks that I've been using it. A couple of war stories. So I've surprisingly, despite the amount that I've been shipping, I've had very few incidents. Very few, like any bugs that have happened I've been able to catch early, and it's not customers telling us about it. Or it's showing up in logs. I do have, it's not in this presentation, but I have a daily routine that runs in Claude Code that will go look at all the logs across everything, just in case there's something that I don't have alerts on, to look for new issues and those types of things. That's also really helpful. But the problem I'm having now is token budget. So I'm on a max plan for Claude. I'm not paying API prices. This is a temporary time, and if I look at my Claude Code usage, I think I'm up to, if I was paying list price, it would probably be $6,000 for just one account for this month for my $200. Like, so I'm getting rate limited more as they're tightening the screws and as this workflow gets more complex and burns more tokens. So I'm having to find ways to, like, token budget is a thing I have to engineer now. If I was working for a big company and they didn't care and they had a leaderboard for how many tokens I burned, that'd be awesome. I don't. I work for a startup. They pay me well, but they're not going to also pay an additional 10 grand a month in token cost. So thinking about how to manage that, I think, is going to be increasingly a big deal, and how you find cheaper sources of tokens. Can you build your workflow in an effective way with your harness that is the best bang for buck, even if you've got the API pricing? I don't think we're going to live in set as many tokens on fire as you can land for forever for any stakeholder, whether it's the model companies or the people, those of us burning. The other piece is CI costs. This was a big surprising for me. As I was asking it to go back and forth and run through iterative loops, now the biggest infrastructure cost for this startup is the build and how many build runners. And so I'm having to like redirect and streamline the build off of this framework that, for many reasons I won't go into, I've been working on migrating out of, but the build has to run on a very large machine on AWS, and it's now the biggest line item. And so how to think about refactoring the build, the app, the whole CI process in a cheaper way has become like in a way that I would not have guessed a couple of months ago, has become a major concern for how I do this. This is what I do differently, but really it's more what am I thinking about outside of my context? And this is in working with teams. I don't know how well this would work in a team of more than just one, or I can imagine a bunch of different ways that you have to work together to figure out how not to step on each other. I personally think teams will be smaller, not necessarily where we're letting go of people, but that we'll have to figure out how to split an existing team of 5 or 6 into 2 teams of 3, or figure out, for those of you who are familiar with team topologies, one of the all-time great books in engineering management, thinking about how to build more stream-aligned teams that are smaller and platform teams to support them. This is just engineering org design. I think that's going to become real for much smaller groups of engineers building software as these types of workflows proliferate. Let's see. Impacts. The other piece is I don't read diffs every time anymore. If it's a straightforward fix, it has gone through my review process. It has been validated by the AI and me. I still validate everything I do. My name goes on it, whether the AI did it or not. And so, I do still review it. I tend to review artifacts it's created rather than the code. One thing I'm actively working on that is not in this presentation is keeping an architecture diagram up to date at different levels of abstraction, and having it update that as part of every change so that everything still is coherent. We're not over-coupling things, and that artifact makes sense. And then I'm sanity checking enough. But honestly, I'm not that great of a software engineer. Probably most of the room is, but Claude helps me be a great software engineer together with me. So, big takeaway, you probably can automate more than you think. My goal in this was to spark some more ideas. Everybody's situation is going to be different, but you don't have to do some big bang. This is sort of looped and iterated over the course of months to where this is now. It will continue to change. I can imagine in your day-to-day work, I hope you can take away something from this, that you can compose just one piece of your life cycle, whether it's review or testing or more upfront, allow to run in parallel, go to 2 or 3 things in parallel rather than 1 or 2 or having to bounce back and forth. But yeah, that's it. I have backup slides for if I needed more time. I don't think I do. Questions?
One thing that I struggle with sometimes is getting good visibility into what Claude Code is doing if I'm running it headless mode or on a long workflow. I really liked your little video at the beginning of your presentation, but I'm curious, is your workflow I'm going to set this up and it's all going to run pretty much headless and unattended, but then if you're doing that, how do you get that visualization?
So that's a thing that I learned about 2 days ago apparently it's a popular thing called Askinema, where you can have it record a session. I did it didn't work inside, but it actually did, I just didn't know I had misplaced where the file was. And so I had Claude go and read the full session, the session log, and turn it into an Askinema cast. It's all text, it's its own format, and it will run that kind of video. It's very small, so that's a fun presentation tool. But I didn't know it existed until 2 days ago, until I asked Claude how to help him make an engaging presentation for this type of audience. But to go back to your question, my personal workflow is I've got a ghosty window. It's got between 5 and 10 tabs. I surf them. I kind of just get in a rhythm of going across, and sort of checking, but it's almost like having been in engineering management and an IC, it's like being, Steve Yegi calls it Jeff Bezos mode, where it's just you're constantly having people come to you with consequential decisions to make. And so it is kind of exhausting, but I'm just rotating through tabs in a window and going over and validating, kind of bouncing around. It's very, I have undiagnosed ADHD, but it is very challenging, and also in some way my brain fits on this workflow because I can be hopping around and being like, okay, here, you need help, you got stuck, those types of things. So it's not headless, it's just I'm not paying attention to them. And my goal is to let them go as far as they can without needing my help until it's like, ready boss, like, check it out. Jim?
You mentioned early on that you're building kind of these mental models and software is being built. I'm just curious, is that mental model become lower fidelity when you're doing AI coding as opposed to coding it yourself? And if so, how do you manage that and kind of keep track of the same thing?
Yeah. So the question was, I should repeat the question. Building a mental model of the system. I mentioned that at the beginning, that being really important. And the question was, does that get less defined? And I think the answer is yes. Like, if I'm being honest, I don't know exactly, from living in the code base day to day to like living at this level, I know where to look. I'm thinking a bigger code base. Like, this is a 5-year-old code base. I don't know how many lines is in it, but it's a mono repo with probably 6 or 7 used different projects that have a single database but it's a monolith that has a single database. But I mostly can keep it in my head. I know where to go, and I know how to use Claude to help me fill in the details. I have not been burned by that. I do worry about it. It is different. I'm on team, like, we're going up a level of abstraction, just like we've gone up a level of abstraction many times before. At least for now, like, until it's so good that you trust it completely. I don't think it's that close, even at the latest models for most software systems that people rely on, for many reasons, including token budget. There's some other questions?
How much of the total budget are you managing by tuning the models you use in different skills?
I am experimenting with that. Yesterday, I started giving the different skills, different models based on how they are, like how intense they are at reasoning versus, like, there's a follow-up skill where it's like, hey, these things were nits that showed up in review, but we don't need to handle those right now. Let's create a follow-up issue in linear. That's haiku. There's a lot of like stuff that's managing back and forth that's Sonic. It is a little buggy when you do stuff like that because, like, I use the big Opus million context model as like the driver, and when it goes down into those other ones, it keeps throwing errors around. Hey, you don't have a million token context window here. So, trying it, running into some issues, but I can imagine, like, if you look forward in the future, for sure, having a workflow that tunes which model to use to the task, I think is going to be part of it.
Can you talk a little bit about did somebody else?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Can you talk about the beats setup? I think you mentioned the tool that you wrote, GitHub. Is that using beats?
I am using beads. I haven't figured out how to use it heavily yet. Beads is, you've heard of Gasbound, it is like the core, it's an issue tracker for agents. My theory is that you can break down a story into multiple beads, let the agent track that better. So far, it's like one-to-one bead to linear issue, and so far I haven't figured out how to make it do that. It's on my list.
I have a follow-up question on this.
Sure.
So, we talked about token budget. So, one of the way I think about beats is if you use the most capable model, which might be Codex sometime because it has a better thinking model or whatever. Let's say you use the most expensive model to break down the task into tickets, beats patterns, right? And then you use cheaper or more readily available models, let's say to open code. You may be able to go further with your budget.
Yeah.
Is there something that you've tried or like thinking?
Yeah, the question was, do you want to use like maybe the big model for planning and breakdown versus something like maybe open code with a local model? Like that's also something I'm experimenting with. I spent way too much money on a new laptop with 128 gigs of RAM so that I could do stuff like that. It's so slow. It is so slow locally out of the box. And so when I run into rate limits, I'm using that as a forcing function to make sure that I'm working on speeding that setup up.
Very fast follow-up to that. It's unfortunate for your new investment, but I would also consider other sources for some of those same open weight models. You can find like Kimi. I think they even like have their own API, and it is orders of magnitude cheaper than like the Frontier model APIs. So some of those local models you're using, you may be able to find an API for that's cost effective.
Sure. Yeah, I totally know that was not a smart investment, but I wanted it was time for a new computer, and I wanted the best one I could buy. Josh.
So now that we all have jetpacks and we're all flying around and engineering a lot faster, it puts a lot of pressure on other parts of the business. Product has to keep up. Right?
Yeah.
You mentioned you're starting tickets. Is there anything you need to see coming from product that your work will be more successful with a particular ticket because it has this information or what's
Yeah, the question was, working with product, have you seen anything that is helpful in producing the right artifacts to feed into a workflow like this? I candidly have little experience working with other people. Like I mentioned, I'm a product engineer. I make a lot of these decisions for the startup. I work with the founders who are the true product managers, but a lot of the detail I am making assumptions about and just saying, hey, I made this choice. Tell me if that's wrong, type of thing. And that's not where most people are in this. And so I do think working with a team, I did a workshop with 3 product managers a couple weeks ago, and like getting them into co-work and how they can use that to make more artifacts to help clarify. And so much of it is like just for the model of people, it's about context. And like, do you have the right context? Can you get aligned around what is the right thing to do and what details do we care about and what not? Like you've added some robots to the conversation, but it's still a conversation. I don't have enough experience to speak authoritatively, but I've probably gone over time. I don't know.
You are.
That's fine. I'm sticking around after.